Hey everybody, Norm from Tested here, and of course at the end of 2020, it's time for us to share our favorite things of the year. I have an array of a few things I've picked up during the lockdown working from home, and as is tradition, I'm going to start off with some coffee table books. Only 3 of them this year, but I think all very worthwhile. The first one is from one of my favorite poster artists, an artist called Laurent Deroux, I think is how you pronounce his name. But he came out with a collection of his work. He's done posters for companies like Mondo, movie posters, officially licensed. Amazing art. His collection for Back to the Future, for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. He did some recently for some Harryhausen films with the company Ish. I can't afford to buy all those posters, and they do sell it very quickly. They're very expensive on eBay, and so the next best thing is to get them collected along with some kind of B-sides, the works in progress, beautifully printed in this book called Mirages. Next up, a photography book. This one I saw being promoted on a few photography blogs, and I had to pick it up. It's called Tokyo from Liam Wong, and he spent years photographing Tokyo nightlife and the city streets in a way that it's cyberpunk. I mean, by the time you watch this, Cyberpunk 2077 isn't out yet, probably. So relish in the cyberpunk that is in the world today through these magnificent photographs. I mean, I like taking photos with my phone and my DSLR, but it's the kind of thing like looking at even the cover photo here, I'm trying to pick out, how do you capture this moment? What is that neon, right? It captures a place where the lighting in that world, it's a time and place. Technology in lighting has changed so much in the urban landscapes, but Tokyo is where you get the mixture of the density, the signage, that lighting, the rain. I mean, it's where Blade Runner and all our favorite noir, sci-fi, cyberpunk films and stories really pull from. And the collection of photos here, you know, not only is it inspirational, but it's kind of like intimidating, really. It makes me want to be a better photographer myself. Now, my last book here actually got as a gift from my wife, Danica, and I mentioned it on the podcast a couple months ago, but it's called The Art of the Hollywood Backdrop. It's a heavy tome. This is what you think of when you think of a big coffee table book with a slipcover and, of course, Wizard of Oz. And on the actual cover of the book itself, oh, it's heavy, Mount Rushmore from North by Northwest. Now, we're all big fans of the show The Mandalorian. Of course, lots have been talked about the technology of the show using the volume to create these backdrops that are in camera, you know. And before that, we were using blue screen and green screen. But before that, when you didn't have digital compositing, it was actually large, hundreds of feet wide, full painted backdrops that were used to represent cityscapes or used to represent landscapes when they were filming on location, or more likely when they were filming on a soundstage. And those backdrops, so many of them were lost to history, but they are actually some being preserved by the very same companies that used to produce them and rent them. And this book dives into some of the most notable ones, how they were used, the artists. You know, it's like matte paintings. You know, the artists who painted those are so rarely credited, but we do get to see their styles and how they influence the look of film, even though you might not have noticed it when you were watching it. This is one of my favorite books of the year. Now I'm going to switch over gears from books to gear, and I've been buying a lot of gear to set up my home office as we've been filming at home. The first is this portable hard drive. I've been working a lot on my laptop. In fact, if you watch the videos I've shot at home, they're all filmed with my laptop, my DSLR. And while most laptops come with decent amount of storage, 500 gigs, a terabyte, I want more, especially if I'm ingesting a ton of video files. And so this Samsung drive, USB-C, it's NVMe, uses that PCI Express lane, so fast. It's not cheap, but I got the max capacity at 2 terabytes, and you can actually edit at least 1080 video, not sure about 4K video, but 1080 video off of this drive. It makes moving my workflow from my laptop to my desktop so much easier. Incredibly fast drive. They come out new versions of this every year. This version has some biometric security, but it's not necessary. And if you have a computer that doesn't have the fastest USB-C, the latest generation, you actually don't need the newest ones. But that form factor here If you have something like a MacBook and you don't want to pay that Apple upcharge for storage, getting one of these drives, Velcroing it to your laptop is a lifesaver. In terms of lighting though, I went on this whole journey this summer configuring my tabletop for miniatures photography and product photography. And one of the things I looked to was inspiration from Adam's workbench. He has his lock line with his flat panel lights, and they're pretty strong. They're actually really great for lighting not only the thing he's working on, but himself as well. But I didn't need something as strong. And there's this whole kind of renaissance in terms of LED panels out there. Last year I talked about these Lume Cubes, small LED, very powerful lights that I can use with snoots, with barn doors. And this year a bunch of companies have kind of put out these small LED panels. I mean, they've been doing it for a while now, but it really feels like it's in this past year that they've exploded in the marketplace, become a little bit more commoditized. I'm not sure if that's because the manufacturing over in China and they're working with the suppliers, but they are different. It's not just like these white labels that they're sticking their own brand into. So a company like Aperture makes this really wonderful light. It's the MX, it flips on. You can change color temperature between warm and cold or brightness. It's not going to work great outdoors, but indoors for photography, miniatures photography, especially with a little bit of a diffuser here, it's actually really powerful. I travel with this all the time. Sandmark also makes one, and again, form factor varies, right? This one has a heat sink, so it doesn't get hot. This one doesn't have a heat sink, it still doesn't get hot. Actually, more lumens here. Battery life is amazing. The thing I'm not as big a fan of is the controls. They don't have as easy button controls. It's more of a scroll wheel here for color temperature and brightness. But that's the thing. These lights, not only can you get them between your warm and whites and bright to dim, there's also full RGB and RGBW ones. You can really light up your scene if you were shooting a short film, shooting stuff in the dark for photography. These lights are wonderful. And there are some notable differences, so do your shopping. But I'll link to these I use in the description below. In terms of mounting the lights, this is not Lockline, and this is the system that I ended up using. So the Lockline that Adam uses, stable, very maneuverable, but if you extend it a little too far over the where you have it mounted, it can drop if you don't have an armature wire through it. So I needed something a little bit more rock solid. And the first thing I found online was this arm system. It's a locking arm, and so you can swivel it a couple different ways. It doesn't do full, multi-axis turning. It's basically all along one axis in terms of the extension, and then you can rotate it. But once you lock these arms in, they're solid. Like, I can put weight around the edge, and it's tightly mounted to the edge of the desk, and it can extend pretty far. But what I wanted to do was get more quick maneuverability to the actual lighting point, to the angle I can point it at. And as opposed to using just one ball head, why not multiple ball heads? And that's what these little mini magic arms are. A magic arm is a system, you can use them for cameras where you basically loosen at one point and it just all 3 points droop very easily then to position where my light is. If I, for example, just want to use a little overhead here, and then tighten it up, and just through one point of tightening, it stays rock solid on this table. And so, for example, I can then perfectly, if I wanted to illuminate over this figure, low, high, at an angle, super easy. And I have a couple of these around my circular table that I work off of. So basically I can light from any direction, overhead, and combine like a little bit of a floodlight, what would be the equivalent of a sky panel, with something that's a little more like a directional arc. And this combination of those lights makes photographing miniatures super fun. Speaking of miniatures, I've been doing a lot of 3D printing of them, and while I don't have a firm recommendation for my favorite 3D printer of the year, because I'm still in the process of testing those, I do want to give a big shout out to the miniatures community that's really embraced 3D printing. There are so many talented 3D modelers out there who are producing files that you can buy, and you can support them on Patreon, or you can purchase them or download them for free. People are releasing them all over in places like Thingiverse and My Mini Factory, and you can, if you buy a $200 to $300 SLA 3D printer, you can print some pretty amazing things that then you can paint yourself. So one artist I really love is Paul Braddock. He has a bunch of iconic 3D models that you may have seen all over the internet, like this skull through a stormtrooper or a skull through a Mandalorian. But on his website, you can actually purchase some beautifully high resolution 3D files that I've been printing, and some of them turn up to be wonderful figures that I'm going to end up painting. So supporting that modeler, 3D modeler, and miniatures community is one of my favorite things this year. But if you don't want a 3D print and you just want to photograph things you can buy off the shelf, I'm of course all about the collectibles and the 6-scale figures. That's my jam. And so I want to share a couple in that world. We're going to talk about accessories first. This is from a company called Replicade, and they started a Kickstarter for a line of 6-scale miniature arcade cabinets. They did Tempest, they did Street Fighter 2, which actually has Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and upcoming there's a Dragon's Lair that's just about to ship. But a couple things I love about this. One, they're perfect for a desktop form factor. They're not going to take up a ton of space. While I'm a big fan of the Arcade 1-Up stuff, I don't have all the space for that, and this is wonderful. And they're fully playable, fully licensed. So Street Fighter 2 here, licensed by Capcom, actually plays on this wonderful screen. The marquee lights up. These buttons and the sticks actually work. And, I mean, they really were well thought out in this. There's a Player 2 option. Has USB ports in the back. The battery is actually inside here, chargeable battery, so you don't need to have it plugged in. It's a little portable. And not only can you plug this in via USB for 2 players, if you have a full-size joystick, USB stick, you can actually plug that in as well, and it will support it. It's a little bit pricey at $120, but I think so well worth it. Well designed. I love that the compartment for storing the accessories are right in the back of the cabinet itself. Why not? Because electronics don't take up that much space, and it's just this wonderful thing. And of course, it being 6-scale makes it a perfect accessory for my 6-scale figures. It's a photographing accessory as well. So my 2 favorite Hot Toys figures this year. One, it's got to be this Iron Man. This is Iron Man Mark 7, as shown in Avengers. And this is like my quintessential Iron Man. You know, Iron Man 1 armor, great. The Iron Man 2 armors, I wasn't as huge a fan of. But when they got to Avengers and this came out toward the end of that movie, I'm like, that's it. It's like extra bulky, tons of armament. And this was actually Hot Toys' 400th figure in their movie Masterpiece series. And so they went all out. It's actually die cast. This is extremely heavy. The satin paint finish here is gorgeous. It's not too reflective. It doesn't look plasticky at all. And it's cold to the touch because it's die cast, yet it retains all of that crazy articulation in the joints, in the swappable body parts. The incredible portrait of Tony Stark here with that battle damage helmet at the end. And this is one of those things, while I have a lot of my Hot Toys in shelves and on display, this one actually stands on my desk because I just like picking him up and manipulating him and posing him, reposing him, and photographing him all the time. It's not a reissue. They did do a Mark 7 a couple years ago, but this Mark 7, I think, is the peak and pinnacle of their Iron Man. But my favorite Hot Toys figure this year just came out, and it's actually another Iron Man designed armor, but not from the movies. This is Iron Spider from the comic books and from the PlayStation video game. Hot Toys has a license to create figures, 6-scale figures that were the alternate costumes from the PlayStation Spider-Man game, and this one is directly inspired by the Iron Spider from the comics during the Civil War era. Now, if you're an MCU fan, you're like, there was an Iron Spider. We saw him at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming. We saw him in Far From Home. We saw him in Infinity War. But that, I think, is an inferior design to the one that was created for the comic books. First of all, the extra Waldo tentacles and spider legs here, they're not tentacles, they're spider legs, are just so massive, add this incredible presence to the figure, incredibly posable, and it's a great comparison with Iron Man because while this is a metal finish and has that satin paint, here it's the illusion of like a spandex-like bodysuit, and so it actually conforms and contorts to the posing while there are some plastic joints here. And so that mix of media with the articulation, the swappable hands, accessories, this has been one of my favorite things to pose and photograph this year as well. So there you have it. Those are some of my favorite things of 2020. Thank you for spending the time geeking out with us and spending your lockdown watching our videos as well. And for those of you who are tested members on our YouTube channel, an extra shout out and thank you for allowing us to keep on having fun, being silly, and hopefully inspiring you to take up making. We'll have more videos from the tested team sharing their favorite things over the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for those. Until next time, have a happy holidays, and we'll see you next year. Bye.